You realize you're too old for tech when your director pitches the company vision, and your face isn't among the 13 on the slide labeled Future Builders. It was a Thursday afternoon in Boston, where autumn brings a crisp chill that reminds you winter is coming faster than you'd like to admit. I sat in the middle row of the glass-walled conference room, nursing a cooling latte, as Jordan Barrett, our 36-year-old Chief Innovation Officer, paced the stage with wireless headset and practiced hand gestures. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. DataStream is redefining what financial technology looks like, he announced, clicking to the next slide showcasing the team photos. These are the visionaries who will take us to our Series C and beyond. I scan the faces, all under 40, most under 35. Despite leading the algorithm team that built the core predictive engine driving our entire platform, my photo wasn't there. Instead, I watched as Megan Williams, my 27-year-old mentee who I'd trained for the past 2 years, smiled from the center of the slide. The title beneath her photo read, Head of Predictive Systems, a position that didn't exist yesterday. No one glanced my way, not even the developers I'd personally hired and coached through their first production deployments. They were too busy nodding along as Jordan declared, We're transitioning legacy systems to make room for fresh approaches and contemporary methodologies. Legacy systems. That's what they called my work now. Legacy. Like something gathering dust on a museum shelf. I didn't flinch. I didn't slouch. I just sipped my coffee and kept my expression neutral, because while they were busy writing me out of the story, I was already plotting the sequel they never saw coming. Before the sleek downtown office with its cold brew on tap and meditation pods, before the glossy investor decks and the Forbes 30 under 30 inches features, DataStream was just 4 people in a converted warehouse space with spotty Wi-Fi and secondhand furniture. Back then, we were called FinFlux Analytics, and our biggest asset was determination. I was 40 when I joined, already considered senior in an industry obsessed with youth. I'd left a stable position at Morgan Stanley because I believed in what we were building, a financial prediction system that could analyze market patterns traditional models missed. The founder, Thomas Reed, was brilliant with data but struggled with practical applications. The other 2 team members were fresh computer science graduates who could code but couldn't see the bigger picture. What they needed was someone who understood both the mathematics and the real-world finance problems we were trying to solve. Someone who could build a bridge between complex algorithms and practical solutions. Someone like me, Rebecca Foster, with 15 years of financial technology experience and enough battle scars to know which mistakes to avoid. I built DataStream's core engine in 4 months, working nights and weekends. My daughter was in middle school then, doing homework beside me while I debugged prediction models. I remember finalizing the first market test while helping her with algebra problems. She was learning variables while I was coding them. Those early days had a special kind of magic, the honest struggle of creation. No one cared that my blazers weren't designer, or that my references to 90s technology sometimes drew blank stares. All that mattered was that I could build what others couldn't even envision. The validation came when our first client, Meridian Trust, ran our prediction model against their portfolio and found a 27% increase in accuracy compared to their in-house system. Then came Apex Financial, then Westwood Investments. Each success brought more attention, more funding, more opportunity. With the Series A funding came the new office, the new branding, and the new people. Lots of new people. Young, energetic graduates from prestigious programs with impressive theoretical knowledge but little practical experience. They brought trendy frameworks and buzzwords like disruptive paradigms and growth hacking. I welcomed them. I mentored them. I stayed late to help them understand our architecture, patiently explaining concepts they hadn't covered in their boot camps or master's programs. I listened to their ideas, incorporated the good ones, and gently redirected the impractical ones. Somewhere along the way, though, the narrative began to shift. It started subtly in marketing materials that described our technology as fresh and revolutionary without mentioning its foundations. Then in press interviews where younger team members became the face of innovations built on my architecture. I told myself, it didn't matter. The work spoke for itself. The code carried my signature for those who knew how to read it. I wasn't in this for recognition. I was in it to build something meaningful. But organizations have memories. and memories can be rewritten. The first real warning sign came during last year's holiday party. I overheard Jordan talking to a venture capitalist by the bar, explaining how we completely rebuilt the predictive framework with modern approaches. I knew they hadn't rebuilt anything. They'd added a visualization layer on top of my engine and called it a transformation. The second warning was when my regular one-on-ones with Thomas, now CEO, became shorter, then rescheduled, then delegated to his assistant. The man who once spent hours whiteboarding algorithms with me now barely made eye contact in the hallway. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Then came the reorganization announcement. To better align with our growth trajectory, the email read, we're establishing product-focused pods with dedicated leadership. My team was split into 3 different pods, each led by someone I had trained. My new title, Technical Advisor. No direct reports, no clear responsibilities. When I asked Thomas about my role in the new structure, he smiled that distant CEO smile and said, Rebecca, you've built an incredible foundation. Now you get to be the wise counsel, sharing your institutional knowledge, while our execution teams drive daily operations. Translation: step aside and fade away quietly. The final confirmation came 6 weeks ago, when Megan presented, DataStream 3, 0 inches to the board. I wasn't invited to the meeting, but Diego from the data team texted me during the presentation. She's showing your predictive model as, newly developed architecture. Didn't even change the class names. I watched the recording later. Megan stood confidently, explaining concepts I had taught her as if they were her own revelations. The board members nodded, impressed by her command of complex topics. No one asked who had originally designed the system. No one seemed to remember there was a before Megan at all. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine, staring at my laptop screen. 15 years of expertise, 4 years dedicated to DataStream, countless weekends sacrificed, and I was being erased because I had committed the unforgivable sin of turning 45 in an industry that worshipped youth. But here's what they didn't understand about people my age. We don't break easily. We've weathered enough storms to know the difference between a setback and an ending. And most importantly, we know how to play the long game. I closed my laptop and made a decision. If DataStream wanted to pretend I was obsolete, I would show them exactly what obsolete could accomplish. The next morning, I reviewed my employment contract, specifically the intellectual property clauses. Like many startups, FinFlux had used standard templates in the early days, before they could afford specialized legal counsel. The IP clause specified that work created using company resources, during company time, or within the scope of assigned duties belonged to the company. But what about work created outside those parameters? What about ideas conceived before joining? What about extensions and innovations developed on personal time, using personal equipment? Those boundaries were less clear, intentionally so. And in that gray area, I found my opening. DataStream's core predictive engine, my creation, had a limitation that I'd identified 2 years ago. It excelled at analyzing structured financial data, but struggled with the increasing volume of unstructured data that influenced markets, social media sentiment, news events, regulatory changes expressed in natural language. I had proposed an extension that would incorporate natural language processing and sentiment analysis into our prediction models. Jordan had dismissed it as too resource-intensive and, not aligned with our current roadmap. In reality, I suspected he simply didn't understand the technical approach well enough to champion it. So I began building it anyway. Nights, weekends, at my own kitchen table, on my personal laptop. I called it Caliber, and I documented everything meticulously. Timestamps of work, equipment used, concepts developed before my DataStream employment. I backed up every version, every design document, every test result. For 4 months, I lived a double life. At DataStream, I played the part they had assigned me, the fading legacy, the technical advisor who spoke only when spoken to. I attended meetings where my suggestions were politely noted, then ignored. I watched Megan and Jordan take credit for optimizations I had implemented months earlier. I smiled and stayed professional, knowing that each day brought me closer to my real work. Nights and weekends belonged to Caliber. I refined the natural language processing models, trained them on financial news archives, built integration layers that could connect with existing prediction systems. I created something that didn't just match DataStream's capabilities, it leapfrogged them. When Caliber was ready for real-world testing, I reached out to Evelyn Hart, a former colleague from Morgan Stanley, who now ran a financial technology incubator. Over coffee at a quiet cafe well away from DataStream's office, I showed her the system. "This is remarkable, Rebecca," she said, watching the demonstration on my laptop. "The sentiment analysis alone is more sophisticated than anything I've seen in production." "It's just a prototype," I said, downplaying the months of intensive work. "But I believe it could transform how prediction engines incorporate unstructured data." Evelyn studied me over her espresso cup. "You built this alone? Outside of DataStream?" "Completely independent project. Personal time, personal equipment." She nodded slowly. "And what exactly are you looking for here? Funding? Partnership?" "Validation first," I replied. "I need to know if this is as good as I think it is." "It's better," she said without hesitation. "What's your next step?" I took a deep breath. "I'm thinking of launching my own venture." Evelyn smiled. Not the polite, distant smile I'd grown accustomed to at DataStream, but the genuine smile of someone who recognized potential. "I think that's exactly what you should do. And I know several people who would be very interested in what you've built." That conversation was the catalyst. Within weeks, I had meetings with angel investors specializing in fintech. I connected with former colleagues who had expressed frustration with existing prediction models. I consulted with an intellectual property attorney who reviewed my documentation and confirmed my position was legally sound. 6 weeks after my kitchen table decision, Caliber Financial Intelligence was incorporated. 2 weeks after that, we secured seed funding. 1 month later, we had our first client, Meridian Trust, the same company that had been DataStream's first client years ago. All this happened while I still showed up at DataStream, still played my assigned role, still waited for them to realize what they were losing. But they were too busy looking forward to notice what was happening right beside them. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Jordan gave presentations about, quote, identifying emerging opportunities, he missed the one walking through his office every day. While Thomas strategized about retaining critical talent, he overlooked the talent he was actively pushing away. I finally resigned on a Tuesday morning, placing my letter on Thomas's desk before the office filled. He found me in the break room an hour later, confusion etched on his face. "Rebecca, what's this about? If this is about the reorganization, we can discuss adjustments to your role." "It's not about my role," I said calmly. "It's about opportunity. I've founded a company that aligns better with my vision for financial prediction technology." His expression shifted from confusion to concern. "You've started a company? In the same space as DataStream?" "Similar space, different approach," I replied. "Focusing on unstructured data analysis and natural language processing for financial predictions. The extension I proposed last year that was deemed not aligned with our roadmap. There are non-compete considerations, IP concerns." I smiled. "I've had excellent legal counsel. Everything was developed independently, outside work hours, with personal resources. The documentation is meticulous." Thomas stared at me, finally seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time in months. "Why didn't you push harder for this internally?" "I did, Thomas. You weren't listening. None of you were. You were too busy replacing me with younger versions who use the right buzzwords but don't have the experience to see the bigger picture." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That wasn't the intention." "Intentions matter less than actions," I said, finishing my coffee. "My last day will be Friday. I've documented all my current projects and transition plans." Word spread quickly. Jordan cornered me that afternoon, more direct than Thomas had been. "You can't just take what you learned here and start a competing business," he said, his practiced confidence slipping to reveal genuine alarm. "I'm not taking anything that belongs to DataStream," I replied. "I'm taking my expertise, my experience, and my own independent work." "We'll fight this legally if we have to," he warned. I met his gaze steadily. "That would be unwise. Your legal team should review my employment contract carefully before making threats. And remember, litigation makes documents public, including communications about transitioning quote-quote legacy employees." He didn't have a rehearsed response for that. By Friday, my departure had transformed from a resignation to an extraction. Security escorted me out, as if I might steal something on my way out the door. My access was revoked before I reached the lobby. My company email bounced messages before I got home. They thought they were protecting themselves. What they were actually doing was freeing me completely. The first 6 months of Caliber were the most intense work period of my life. We secured office space in Cambridge, assembled a small but mighty team of experienced professionals, many over 40, some over 50, and refined our product for market. We moved fast but methodically, building on decades of combined experience. Our advantage wasn't just technological, it was experiential. We understood the real problems financial institutions faced because we'd worked in those institutions. We'd lived through market crashes and regulatory changes. We'd seen the limitations of existing systems firsthand. What we built wasn't just incrementally better, it was transformative. Our natural language processing engines could analyze thousands of news sources, regulatory filings, and social media channels to identify market-moving patterns before they fully emerged. Our prediction models incorporated both structured and unstructured data, providing insights that traditional systems missed entirely. Meanwhile, DataStream was struggling. Without my expertise maintaining the core engine, performance issues began to surface. Clients reported inconsistent results. New features launched with bugs that would have been obvious to someone with my experience. Their much-hyped 3.0 release was delayed, then scaled back, then quietly rolled out with fewer capabilities than promised. I took no pleasure in their difficulties. I had too much of myself invested in that code to enjoy watching it falter. But I recognized the pattern. They had prioritized perception over substance, youth over experience, buzzwords over fundamentals. They were paying the price for those choices. 9 months after my departure, rumors began circulating that DataStream was looking for acquisition offers. Their Series B funding had fallen through after the troubled product release, and investors were growing impatient with missed projections. I followed the developments with professional interest but kept my focus on Caliber's growth. We were exceeding our own projections, adding new clients every month, expanding our team selectively with people chosen for skill rather than age or pedigree. Then came the call I never expected, from Evelyn Hart, who had become one of Caliber's advisors. "Rebecca, I just heard something interesting through my VC contacts," she said without preamble. "DataStream is officially for sale, and the asking price is dropping weekly." "That's unfortunate," I replied, genuinely meaning it. "They have good people there." "Yes, but more importantly, they have a client list that would be valuable to Caliber, and a core engine that, despite recent issues, would complement your technology." I nearly dropped my phone. "Are you suggesting we acquire DataStream?" "I'm suggesting you consider it," Evelyn said. "Their valuation has dropped to a point where it might make strategic sense. You could leverage their client relationships and incorporate their technology as a subsidiary offering, while your more advanced system becomes the flagship. That would be," I struggled to find the right word, "poetic justice?" Evelyn supplied with a chuckle. "Perhaps, but I'm suggesting it for purely business reasons. It could accelerate your growth significantly." The breaking point came in the form of a calendar invitation. Strategic resource allocation, corporate speak for deciding who stays and who goes. It appeared in my inbox on a rainy Wednesday morning, scheduled for 2 p.m. the following day. The attendees list included me, Thomas, Jordan, and Vanessa from HR. No agenda attached, but I didn't need one to understand what was happening. I'd seen this pattern before. First, the gradual exclusion, then the reassignment of responsibilities, and finally the formal removal, all executed with clinical precision and carefully selected language designed to make the company sound visionary rather than discriminatory. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. 15 years of financial technology experience, 4 years dedicated to building DataStream's core technology, countless weekends and late nights invested in perfecting algorithms that now powered a $70 million valuation, and it had come to this. A 30-minute meeting with a generic title and an HR representative present. That evening, I called my daughter Claire, now in her first year of college studying computer science. "Mom, they can't just push you out because of your age," she said when I explained the situation. "That's literally illegal." "It's rarely that explicit," I explained. "They don't say you're too old. They say we're going in a different direction, or restructuring for future growth. They talk about fresh perspectives and, quote, contemporary approaches. The message is clear, but the words are carefully chosen." "So what are you going to do?" she asked. "Fight it?" I paused, considering the question. Fighting meant lawyers, months of stress, potential damage to my professional reputation regardless of outcome. Even if I won, I'd be returning to an environment that had already decided I didn't belong. "I'm going to build something better," I said finally. "Something they'll wish they had valued while they had the chance." The next morning, I arrived at the office early, dressed in a charcoal suit that projected confidence and professionalism. I brought coffee from the artisanal shop across the street, not the company's standard fare, but the good stuff. Small acts of self-respect matter when you're about to be discarded. At precisely 1:58 p.m., I walked into conference room C, taking a seat facing the door. Thomas and Vanessa arrived together at 2:01, followed by Jordan a minute later, typing furiously on his phone. "Rebecca," Thomas began with that particular tone executives use when delivering uncomfortable news. "Thank you for making time for this discussion." As if I had a choice. "We've been evaluating our organizational structure in light of our Series B objectives," he continued, glancing at a document Vanessa had placed before him. "As we scale, we need to ensure our leadership architecture aligns with market expectations and investor guidance." I nodded, waiting for him to reach the point beneath the jargon. "Your contributions to DataStream have been significant," he said, making brief eye contact before looking back at the document. "The foundation you helped establish has positioned us for this growth phase. However, as we evolve, we're consolidating certain technical oversight functions and creating a more streamlined reporting structure." "You're eliminating my position," I said, cutting through the corporate euphemisms. Thomas looked momentarily relieved at not having to find another way to say it. "We're transitioning your responsibilities to the technical pod structure. Given your tenure and contributions, we want to offer a runway for this transition." Vanessa slid a folder across the table. "We've prepared a separation package that includes 4 months of salary continuation, extended benefits coverage, and outplacement services. We're also offering a consulting arrangement for the first 60 days to facilitate knowledge transfer." I didn't open the folder. "And if I decline?" Jordan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "Rebecca, this is a generous package. The consulting fee alone is substantial." "That's because you know you'll need help when things start breaking," I replied evenly. "Systems you don't fully understand will require maintenance. Processes I designed will need adjustments. You're not being generous. You're being pragmatic." "That's unnecessarily combative," Thomas said, frowning. "We value your contributions. This is simply about aligning our structure with our future direction." I looked at each of them in turn. Thomas with his practiced CEO neutrality, Jordan with his barely concealed impatience, Vanessa with her professional HR sympathy. "When did you decide?" I asked. "This has been a careful, deliberate process," Thomas began. "When?" I repeated. "The reorganization planning began about 2 months ago," Vanessa offered. 2 months. Around the time Jordan presented his Future Builders slide. Around the time Megan began attending leadership meetings I was no longer invited to. Around the time my access to certain development environments was quietly restricted, quote, for security streamlining. By 2 a.m., I had compiled a comprehensive inventory of my intellectual contributions, carefully separated into company-owned and personally retained categories. I had also drafted a counter-proposal to their separation agreement, one that protected my right to work in my field of expertise while respecting legitimate company interests. I slept for 4 hours, then woke feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. The uncertainty was gone. The path forward was taking shape. The weight of trying to belong in a place that didn't value me had lifted. I arrived at the office at 7:30 a.m., before most of the team. I spent the first hour organizing my digital files, creating clear documentation for projects in progress, and preparing transition notes for each system I maintained. Not because DataStream deserved this professionalism, but because I refused to leave anything less than a spotless professional record behind me. At 9:15, I requested a meeting with Megan. She appeared in my office doorway looking uncomfortable, clearly already aware of yesterday's decision. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, hovering in the doorway rather than taking a seat. "Yes. Since you'll be taking over the predictive engine maintenance, I thought we should discuss the quarterly recalibration process. It's due next week." My final day arrived with little fanfare. No goodbye party, no team lunch, no card circulated for signatures. Just a morning meeting with IT to confirm account deactivation procedures, an exit interview with HR, and a final handover session with Megan. At 4:30 p.m., I packed my personal items into a single box. Family photos, a few books, the Glass Award from the Massachusetts Technology Council that recognized the innovative architecture of our prediction system. So little to show for 4 years of building technology that now powered a multi-million-dollar company. As I prepared to leave, Megan appeared at my office door. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," she said, stepping inside. "And thank you for everything you've taught me and for how gracefully you've handled this whole situation." "You're welcome," I replied. "Remember what I said about the quarterly recalibration. Don't let Jordan convince you it can wait. Model drift compounds quickly." She nodded. "I won't." She hesitated, then added, "I hope whatever you do next is amazing. You deserve that." "Thank you, Megan. I hope DataStream continues to succeed. There are good people here doing important work." We shook hands, and she left. I took one final look around the office, where I had spent countless hours building something I believed in, then picked up my box and walked out the door. In the lobby, I turned in my access badge to security. The guard, Mike, who had greeted me every morning for 4 years, looked genuinely sad. "Sorry to see you go, Miss Foster," he said. "You were always one of the good ones." I smiled. "Thank you, Mike. Take care of yourself." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. I stood for a moment, feeling the weight of the transition. One chapter closed, another beginning. The uncertainty should have been terrifying, but instead, I felt a growing sense of possibility. I had built something valuable once. I could do it again, but this time on my own terms. This time, creating an environment that valued experience alongside innovation. This time, building not just technology, but a culture that recognized worth beyond youth. I took a deep breath of the spring air, shifted my box of belongings, and walked toward the T station. Not retreating, not escaping, but advancing towards something better. The future I had been excluded from was about to become the future I created. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.